Greetings, everyone. Tim Anderson here, aka Renfail, and welcome to the latest episode of Mondays in MMORPGs, where we are going to be talking about what makes a good game, what makes a good MMORPG. I am joined by the faithful compatriot.
Um, Scribbles. People call me Jesse. I work on Defend the Night, co-founder of Ninja Loot Games. Just here to talk about my love for MMORPGs,
And
and it's bandana night, by
it
the
is
way.
been. I wasn't gonna. I always
Except,
typically just
except,
wear my hat, but it
except
was.
we didn't give the memo to
Sorry
Ashton.
to the new fellow here tonight. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Ashton Phoenix. I've been playing MMOs since 2001 with Everquest, and I do roleplay. I've done a podcast called RP MMO Radio, and currently Crash While Loading. And I've played so many MMOs, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's sad.
Did you
Sad.
ever, by chance, because I think you're going to be one of the people we've had on the show who has played an equal amount of games compared to the rest of us, did you by chance ever play it was only ever in alpha, but there was a Stargate MMO years ago that unfortunately
Uh,
fell apart.
the the
I
one
can't
of my
remember.
was I never got into it, but I was watching that thing like a hot. I'm a huge Stargate fan, and
Yeah.
I watched the stupid videos on how they did the sound design on the housing and how it with the little chimes in the Teal'c's camp. I forget their name.
It's one of
The
the
bad guys.
oh,
Yeah,
I don't remember either.
yeah.
But that's one of those MMOs that I can think of that along the way I did get in and I played it, and it was very early alpha, and it was fun. It had a lot of
Mm,
promise, and then it just, for
it died.
various reasons, it died. But you just got me thinking when you were talking about all the games that just popped into my mind.
Yeah,
Um,
one of my favorites that nobody has played is Matrix Online.
I
Almost
never played it.
nobody has played that. It
Yeah,
was fun. It was bad. Don't get me wrong. By like a lot of standards, their server stability, combat systems. It had a lot of style though. It was a lot of fun.
I actually saw that come up in an article somewhere recently on Facebook. I really don't remember what magazine outlet was talking about it, but
Yeah, it
um,
did a lot of interesting things.
yeah, that's one
Is
of
it?
those that fell by the wayside, like Star Wars Galaxies post and
And the
pre.
story was canon to the Matrix universe. They killed Morpheus off in the first season, and it was a
Damn.
who killed Morpheus, and it was whole big
Do
thing.
they
Yeah,
still is there an emulator running of that one still, or
I
do you know?
think
Yeah, I
there
was just
is
gonna ask
one,
that. For
but
which one? For Matrix Online?
Matrix, yeah. I think there is, but it's not real. It's not like the Star Wars Galaxies one, which is literally coming out with Cloud City, here soon. Actually, I think it just came out, and a brand new expansion made by fans. I mean, how
Oh wow,
often
I
does
did
that
not know
never happen?
that.
If you haven't seen the trailer, looks like it's done by Ralph Coster from back in the
I'm
day. I
gonna
mean,
have to
it's
go check that out.
fantastic.
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
I dabbled there about 2 years ago. I went onto that server, the Star Wars Old Republic, not the Old Republic, the Star Wars
Galaxies.
Galaxies
Mm.
emulator like 2 years ago because I was doing R&D for the crafting system for Saga, and I was wanting to get my hands on for some stuff, and I jumped in and I hadn't played that game since it was live years and years and years
Yeah,
ago.
same here.
So
Everybody raves about that crafting system, which could be a segue into what makes a good game.
That is.
yes,
Yep.
I was about to get into that point.
Mhm.
Am I drinking alone tonight, or did anybody else bring?
Oh, I got some what do you call it, bird dog whiskey with me tonight,
I have
and
never
it's
heard of
it's
Bird Dog
in
whiskey.
my it's a
Yeah.
good Kentucky bourbon. So
Yep. Got my
that,
whiskey in my fancy plastic cup.
I have a bottle of Santa Catalina Cab Sav from 2018.
mm,
Um, my wife and I drink a lot of wine, and we went on a wine spending spree last Sunday because liquor store had discounts. So I'm gonna enjoy some red
Nice.
tonight. Um,
so
what
we're
makes a
whiskeying it up.
what makes a good MMORPG? So all of us have 20 years of industry experience at this point. Um,
Well, we have 20 years of playing, that's for sure.
Playing experience. Yeah.
well, I'm gonna call it industry experience, but whatever.
As
It could
much
be.
as I look into it, sure. I would almost say yeah. I'm gonna go with it. I'll take
Um,
the title.
I started with EverQuest was the first one that I played. Jesse, I think yours was. I don't remember. You told us on the first episode, and I forget now.
Well, yeah, that definitely was the bigger one. For MMORPGs was EverQuest for me. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I heard of Meridian 59. I never got to play it. My friends were playing it at the time, but that was that was it.
What was your
So
first one, Ashen?
It was EverQuest just a month or two after Kunark came out, the first expansion, and I remember seeing MMOs on there. Like Meridian was one of them. Ultima was the big one at the time, and looking at them and thinking, what kind of idiot would spend $15 a month to play a video game every month? Yeah, this
Yeah,
one
here we
right here.
are.
Once I got into it, I finally got why. It's like, oh, it's a perpetual world. It's not like a Link to the Past, which is a great game, but once you're done, you're done.
Yeah.
It's like a
I mean,
link.
I,
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
I
it's
was
totally
I
different.
was I was doubly duped because I had to buy like two computers to make it run right.
Oh,
It's
jeez.
like the first one, like yeah, they'll run on this one. Never really
Hmm.
ran it correctly, so I had to buy another one. So
Well, my first
yeah,
computer had a 512 megabyte hard drive, which was all the hard drive you'll probably need for the rest of your life, according to the sales guy. Yeah.
was he from Circuit City too?
Worse, Dell.
See, my
No.
my first one I bought was I bought a Gateway, which was like a step below Dell.
I
That's
remember Gateway,
literally
the
I
cow
went out.
people.
Yeah, I literally went out, and the only reason was because that's what my dad was a dairy farmer and a rancher and had a construction company, so he bought them because of their ranching background and the cow shit. So I knew them from
Yeah.
growing up because as a teenager, that's what we had in the house. So when it came time to buy my own, in '99, I went out and bought one of those, and I spent way more than I should have for something that, it ultimately lasted me about 4 years. But yeah,
Hmm.
that was,
Technology moves so fast back then. It still
yeah,
does,
it
but
still does,
nothing like
yeah.
that 2000, 2010.
Mm.
So I think when I start thinking about MMORPGs, something that we've talked a lot about over the past few episodes in this season has been, the focus on the original, like, first generations were heavily focused on group-based content, and then we kind of, it was group-based, subscription only, and we've talked about how subscriptions are kind of dead. They've been dead for a while. Everybody's got subscription fatigue. We've got all these other things vying for attention, whether it's Netflix, Hulu, Peacock, other games, Xbox Live, PlayStation Plus. We've talked about the evolution of subscription to free to play and then hybrid models. um, but tonight, what I really want to think about is in our opinions, some of the things that really define. Because there have been some really good MMORPGs, and there have been some really shitty MMORPGs that have come out over the years. So in thinking of good ones, I always come back to, like, EverQuest for me is always at the pinnacle. And I've had people ask me over the years, like, well, if you loved it so much, why did you quit playing it? And it's like, well, I guess it's kind of like when I was a kid, didn't really, maybe not a kid, but when I became an late teen, early adult, I didn't really like beer, But then I got older and I started liking beer. And the older I've gotten, I have further refined the things I like when it comes to beer. I don't like light beers. I don't like Budweiser. I'm not a big IPA hoppy fan, but I do like a good stout, something double malt, that kind of stuff I like. But that's a very refined niche in terms of beer,
Yeah.
and it's evolved over time. So it's like, yeah, I love EverQuest One, but also I love Lord of the Rings Online, and I've loved
Hmm.
Star Wars: The Old Republic, and I've loved some other games here and
Mm.
there, little affairs, but nothing that's been serious enough to keep me playing for many, many
Yeah.
years apart from a handful. So I'd love to hear from you guys. For me, that the one staple I can say, and I've talked about this on the show in the past, the one staple game for me since it launched in 2007 has been Lord of the Rings Online. And the one reason I like that game, despite the fact that it went free to play and they've mangled that along the way to some degree, the story in that game for me, it turns some people off because it's a lore dump and you have to read a shitload. I mean, you're reading novel length paragraphs every time you do a quest for the Epic Book
Hmm.
series. Some people don't like that. I do because it sucks me in and it really immerses me in the game. And that's one of those things I can look at and say, for me, one of the most important aspects of a good MMORPG is a story that pulls me in. That's not the only thing, but that's one of the ones that I would like to start with for me is story. What do you guys have that's like one of your favorite things?
I'll let the new guest go
Yeah.
Yeah.
tonight first. Yeah, let's try this one.
Well, and real quick too, one of the other reasons, aside from your tastes evolving, the problem with MMOs, they evolve too. The game that you loved for the first 4 years, for me, after it was after Planes of Power on EverQuest, I grew to dislike the game and the direction it was going. It changed, and it didn't change for the better. So I moved on,
Yeah,
which
GOD was my
doesn't happen with
last.
movies.
That's true. Does
You
not.
watch Star Wars from 1977. It's still
It's the
Star
same
Wars. It
movie.
hasn't evolved. You could go into the sequels, but that's different. The original movie is still the same. An MMO, not so much. For me, originally it was just gameplay and the fact that they were fresh and the quests. For me now, it's definitely more story oriented and the fluidity of combat. Like I don't even mind the
Mm.
like tab, like the old style tab on one character. Like I'm playing Final Fantasy 14 lately, which versus ESO, which when you play ESO, you just kind of hit everything around you regardless. There's no tabbing. I enjoy both forms of combat. They're both good, but a good, well-told story is something now that drags me in that I didn't used to care about. I was the kid that was like dot 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 dot, hit and enter through every quest thing. I don't care why I need to kill 15 kobolds. I just have to kill them. Just get on with it. Shut up, you stupid dwarf. And now I'll read all that dialogue, or if it's voice acted, I'll listen to the cutscene.
Well,
But yeah, for me, it's the two combined that have to really come together.
I have a question on that note too, because I know a lot of people have raved about the story in ESO, and I have tried to play that game probably half a dozen times over the years, and I will occasionally get sucked in for 2 to 3 weeks, but it's never been able to get me enough to keep me going beyond like 3 weeks, despite the fact that it's got great voice acting
Hmm.
and it does have good story. So I'm just curious, in your perspective, what do you think makes if that's you were mentioning ESO
Yeah.
is from a story perspective, what do you think that it is about that story that resonates with you?
Well, I'm a fan of Elder Scrolls, of course.
Okay.
But and I will admit they're not all equal. Like the most recent expansion that they did that had involved the vampires and the werewolves and stuff, it was not good. I did not enjoy it. I struggled to get through it. I mean, I enjoy a good vampire story, but it was cliche. It was kind of boring. ESO's problem is that you're always saving Nern every single expansion. It's the end of the world as we know it,
Every
and no
time.
one feels fine. Yeah, and it gets old. But with the Morrowind expansion, the story on that was good. It involved Vivek and the Tribunal, the Three, and all that, and it was told very well. It was very well written. Even the Khajiit one, and I hate. There's certain biomes I hate: swamps and deserts, and the Khajiit are in a desert. I also don't really care for the Khajiit. They're just kind of, yes, everything is happy and moon sugar, blah, blah, blah. I get it. You're very
Buy my
fluffy.
shit, take my drugs.
Yes, yes. Take it. Yes, you have the coin. I have merchandise. But even it was good. And it had the stupid dragons, which lore wise, they aren't supposed to be around until, Skyrim in Elder Scrolls 4 or 5. I forget. 5. Uh, but it was still well done. The characters and the side characters were all interesting and well told. And then there's others that hit. The very first original one, the core of ESO, was pretty good. If that it really depends on where you're going because each one of those expansions is its own self-contained story.
I did
So
briefly
if
play
you
Morrowind. That
yeah,
was that
and
was
that
one
was
of the
one of the better
ones.
ones.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that kept me going for a few weeks, but
Hmm.
I still petered out. I don't know
They
that I ever got to the end of it.
They also have one of the things that actually drags it down is the number of because everything in that game is also voice acted. So if you want to listen to it all, you're listening to a lot. So if you're doing side quests, and some of them can be as long as other games' actual main story quests, you can get totally sidetracked from what the heck is going on and just completely lose the train of the story. And it happens very easily.
Right.
I was just thinking that's something that ever since they've modified Star Wars: Old Republic over the years, and when I went back and played it 2 years ago, I only mentioned this because I just started playing it again a few days ago because I hadn't played it in a couple years, and they've been promoting it on their social media. But a couple years ago, it was the first time I'd been back in about a year and a half or so, and one of the changes they had made since the last time I'd played was they've just enhanced all of the XP gain to the point where you used to have to do, like, you would go to a planet and you would have to do the entire quest line for the planet plus your
Hmm.
class quest line to be able to stay on top of the levels required
And
for
the
the
side quests, everything
everything.
had to be done.
But now, even on the free to play, because they give you the bonus things that you can click that are like 2 hour long buffs, you can now go in and just focus on your class storyline. And I went, I think it was 2019. Um, hell, I did this last year too. I forgot about this. Last year, I went in late last year, like summertime, towards the end of the fall. I went in and I did the smuggler storyline and the bounty hunter storylines back to back, and I got like 40 hours of gameplay out of each storyline.
Hmm.
And the best part about it was because of the way they've changed it now, you don't have to do all the side quest shit that you've done on 10 different alts. And since I had never played the smuggler all the way through or the bounty hunter, it was like playing two separate games.
It was a
Um,
single player game at
right.
that point.
These
You just
days it
happened to be in
is.
another world. Yeah.
Correct. But it was an interesting from a storyline perspective that they've stripped that need to do side quests out so that you can focus on just your class storyline and
Hmm.
not get sidetracked because that's all fully voiced too. But if it's fresh, I feel less urge to hit the space bar and like space through it, because it's
Yeah.
somewhat interesting.
Hmm. Hmm. I think I'm a little bit different than you guys.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
Oh, so
Dissension.
yeah, so it's totally different for me. I do like voiceovers and chats like that, but it has to fit the genre. I think RPGs make it great for you to jump in there and have a storyline presented to you. In MMORPGs, I kind of think of as a virtual world. So I want to have a say in the story writing. I want there to be a intro of the world just to build that background to know what I'm into. And then I want to be fully immersed in the world. I want to say, hey, if there's something I want to happen in this world, I want to be able to release my ideas onto the world and see what can happen uh, when those ideas are about to the player base. So my action should matter. That's the way I've always wanted MMORPGs to happen. For instance, way back even in EverQuest, they give you the freedom to explore. Uh, they're not trajectoring you in a theme park way to the next quest, so you can kind of develop your own uh, role-playing persona. You can actually talk to people in town and talk to other players and have them help you out and
Mhm.
actually give them a sort of a quest line per se. So I think it's important if we're thinking about MMORPGs, we got to think of it differently as the player has impact. The player is the writer. The player is hands on in developing the story. If we do that, we're going to have a good game.
I don't know
So
that any game has ever done truly. I mean, the technology. I don't think it's been there to
Yeah, I
allow the
you
player
that's
to
basic
impact the story in that way.
that's slipping more like into actual role playing, which I do as
Yeah.
well, don't get me wrong. I
well,
know I run all that stuff, but
uh,
the
how would you like it if you could impact? Like say, hey, I'm having this great impactful story, and like so
I love it.
if you have like staff that can monitor that storyline that you're presenting, then be like, hey, wow, this is great. So maybe we're gonna the trajectory will be this way instead of just having it fed to
Yeah.
you.
There were a few that tried or
Mm,
claimed to do that. Rift comes to mind, where
mm.
you could log in out of a village and log back in, and it's completely taken over by the enemy. Right. Well, yeah, for maybe like half an hour, and then it goes away all on its own.
Yeah, I love good stories, but just I mean, I think those are should be. I'm just me by the way, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
just I think you know those stories should be directed towards RPGs or something with like games that have the click and point and click and adventures. and things like that. But MMORPGs should be more virtual worldy.
I think something like that will come along, but right now it would take the advancement of AI because there's especially if it was a popular MMO, even I mean if it
Or
wasn't a very popular MMO, just it's just so
or
many servers.
Manpower,
Yeah,
too.
the
manpower.
manpower.
Mm.
But if you get if you know, as I mean, we could see AI coming up more and more. That's one of the things with the latest console generation. It's not so much that the graphics are looking more
Mm.
amazing, it's what is happening under the hood with AI and all the stuff that can be done that you don't see that will impact the games in ways you don't know, but you'll feel. You won't
Yeah,
see it, but
but
you'll feel it.
I'm
So
probably I'm probably releasing more of the bag. But how about just giving several choices to impact the world, and then that choice can create the objective of everyone
EverQuest
else.
Next was supposed to
supposed
do
to,
that.
yeah.
Suppose they had the voxels and whatnot, and there was supposed to be that was supposed to happen in EverQuest
Mm.
Next, and then I got bilked out of $100, so not salty at all about that one.
Me too. I think it was four actually.
Yeah,
I bought
So
like landmark
landmark
landmark.
stuff.
Yeah.
There's an
and
interesting side note to this real quick because you spawned something into my mind that I was remembering. EA filed a
Mhm.
patent recently for a dynamic difficulty adjustment technology, which
Yes.
basically it's going to be via the cloud and it's going to be scaling difficulty based on player interaction. So this is an interesting concept if it could theoretically be applied to MMOs. I'm not sure about how deep we want to go down that rabbit hole. But basically the patent was approved on March 25th, and the intention is to keep players engaged for as long as possible. The quote here
Right.
is that often games that are too difficult or too easy will result in less enjoyment for a user. Consequently, the user is likely to play the game less. Thus, one of the challenges of game development is to design a game with a difficulty level that is most likely to keep it. I mean, it's an interesting patent if you look into this because it's basically looking
Hmm.
at how you play, and then it's going to automatically adjust things. This is what you're talking about in terms of underneath the hood,
Yeah.
Phoenix.
That one I actually I'm aware when that happened. The only problem I have with that, at least the way I read it, is it sounds like EA is just trying to extend the life of a game to keep you playing it. Like
It's monetization for them.
yeah, it's a back version of monetization as opposed to letting you decide how good or bad you are. Because I play most of my games on the standard difficulty, but there are a few,
I'm an easy mode guy.
yeah, that
First playthrough is always easy mode. Yeah.
I want to do the story, and I don't really care about. One of a good one for that is that I started playing Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. Not an MMO, I know, but the combat is completely worthless. I don't play that game for the combat. That it's a side thing that happens. It is superfluous to the actual story and the level design. So I put it on easy. But I don't want an AI from EA saying not taking away that option and then being like, "Well, he's pretty good at this, so we're gonna make it even more difficult." So he makes sure. Got it. Thought I turned that off. He makes sure he plays his 40 hours and is stuck in here as opposed to the 20 hours that he probably would have finished it.
Hmm.
Mm.
In terms of MMOs, though, that would be different because you're also, we all technically we already have things like scaling and whatnot with depending if your group, depending on your level. ESO unfortunately is notorious for that because no matter from level 1 to 50, all the overworld mobs feel exactly the same. They all seem to die at the same speed, regardless of how boss you are
I
or
think
how high level you are.
didn't World of Warcraft has changed their retail to that as well, with it's all scaling now, if I'm not
Yeah, I
mistaken.
think so.
And that to me is one of the things. Just as a side note, talking about what makes a good MMORPG. The moment a game has scaling, I'm out. I can't. For me, it's
Yeah,
like then maybe that's one of the reasons I hadn't thought about it until we were sitting here talking about it in this context. Maybe that's one of the reasons why ESO has never, or also retail has never
Hmm.
appealed to me because I never played Warcraft back in the day. I came into it very late because I was too busy with EQ2 for like 7 years. So
Yeah,
it's like
same
I didn't
here.
have time to
yeah.
play, World of Warcraft. But
I
all
tried.
this
I wanted to, but
I've
couldn't get
tried it
into it.
like half a dozen times, and even my wife's tried it with me, and we just can't get into it. But that scaling thing, that takes me out because I like difficulty scaling because the challenge of that because the fun part about that, especially if we go back to like EverQuest 1, is it's up to me to decide whether or not something, I mean, technically, there is a cap at which point something is
Yeah,
too difficult for me to do. But to some degree, I can influence how difficult something is by how many people I bring with me. And so there's this coordination of gameplay with
social
other
aspect.
people. It's that social aspect where I can make something easier or overcome a challenge by getting people together with me and going forth and doing something, which is that emergent gameplay slash somewhat affecting the world, but not, I think, in the way that Scribbles is talking about.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
so we can get back to just affecting the world. Um, now we're talking about with the pandemic and everything that everybody's going to be under one roof, so to speak. With the pandemic happening, everybody's working from home wherever they want to work. So
yeah,
you're not having issues of I have to pay somebody in San Diego this much money because the cost of living there is that. You could actually morph your payment system to the people that would actually accept your payment model, and maybe that could be something that could help getting more hands uh,
yeah,
on the game, so to speak. So I hope that happens with the pandemic, and well, one thing we get good out of this whole shit bag that we've been handed is maybe just the global market to help out with game development or game
yeah.
management.
Well, and it's something that's actually, I mean, you say that too, but it used to kind of happen. I mean, how many times were you playing EverQuest back in the day, even EverQuest 2 and or Star Wars Galaxies when somebody would dev would come on playing uh, Darth Vader or Furiona V or some god battle would happen in the Lesser Feydark, and they were special events that were run by the moderators and the coordinators and the developers of the game.
Mm,
I don't know that that happens anymore ever
Mm.
anywhere.
No, we talked about it for, I mean, part of my core design when I was the creative director on Saga of Lucibia, from day one, I've probably done 75 videos on this and interviews over the years, was for me the importance of GM events and live events
Yeah,
because I was there for those, and it, they don't exist anymore. And the one thing that I wanted to do was focus more on those types of events as opposed to static quests that never change, because static quests are boring. So why, in my mind, I was saying, why spend man hours developing a whole bunch of static quests that people are going to get bored of? They're going to go up on a wiki, no one's going to, need to know anything about them
hmm,
anymore. Why not replace that with live events and live quests? Because one of the things that I used to do back in the day, we were talking about role play, EverQuest 1, EverQuest 2. I actually got my first professional writing gig because on Antonio Vale, the roleplay server for EverQuest, it
hmm,
used to be the roleplay server for EverQuest 2. I wrote a series of roleplay events with this other guild that we were doing called the first one was called the Eye of Power, and we did this like 6 month thing where the guild leader of that guild and myself, we would write these posts back and forth on each other's forums, and then we hosted these live events on the server. And we'd have 75 to 150 people show up, and our guild members would play the parts of NPCs, and we would have these quests that we would give out, and they would run around the world and play things. And then I carried that over into Vanguard, and the first time we did it was in Tersh. We had more than 300 people show up and just crashed the zone over and over and over.
uh-huh.
But
amazing.
that got
I think
the
I was there.
it could have been.
I role played it. Our guild was with Jazz was the Silver Circle, and that sounds familiar. Was there like a blockade in Kinos and stuff like that?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
there. I played in
okay,
those events. Yeah,
epic. So actually,
yeah.
the Vanguard one didn't, but the EverQuest 2 one, one of the somebody from, I think they were called, I don't remember the name of the company now. It was a Swedish company that had gaming magazines and stuff, and one of their guys was a role player on the server, contacted me because I wrote the events and said, "Hey, do you want to come write guides for EverQuest 2 and Vanguard?" And I went, "Fuck yeah!" I started off
Sure.
EverQuest 2 and then Vanguard, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Fuck yeah!" But those role play type events, for me, I've always looked at those and said, if the I took it upon myself because the GMs weren't doing it anymore. And the reason is just
Yeah.
because in the early days, when you only had a couple thousand people on a server, it was manageable. So you could have your staff of like 10 people putting together those types of events. And then as servers got bigger and more people started playing, it becomes this manpower thing where it's like, it's just cost prohibitive
Mm.
from a certain point of view. You have to
Right.
pick your battles, but I think sometimes from a corporate angle, they're not willing to put that sort of man time into creating those custom quests and custom events because it's simpler and cheaper to just write a
Mm.
static quest line that is there
Yeah.
forever. But I
Well,
love live events.
going into what help for me, part of, again, this is all subjective, obviously, but what would actually help do that is role play support.
Hmm.
Things like Final Fantasy 14, ESO is they're better at it, but it seems like a lot of the MMOs that actually support role players, because these people are, I know because they're my people. We're crazy. We'll spend insane amounts of money on digital crap that doesn't have any real world value. And yet, I know people that have probably $1,000 in housing in ESO alone, and that's not going into what they've spent back in EQ2, which we don't even play anymore. But role play
Yeah.
support, if they EverQuest 2 did a great thing. There was a yearly festival that was run by role players, and it had on Antonia Bale, and it had the blessing of the developers, and they would take a zone in I forget the zone right out of Kinos now. It's been so long. I think it was
Oh,
Antonia, actually.
yeah, Antonia was Antarctica
Antonia,
Hills, or
Antonica Hills, thank you.
yeah, I
And
think.
in the very back area, there was a place, and the developers would patch the area with buildings and stages, and the role players would then come in and have things set up. They would do games of chance and with the slash random. They would do just all sorts of
Yeah.
actual events. And the developers, all they had to do was drop a bunch of dumb assets in the middle of nowhere, leave it
Mhm.
there for a week, and pick it up and come and sweep up afterwards.
Just
That was
patch it
it.
out, patch it
And
in, patch it out.
yeah, the role players did all the rest of it.
I love it.
And
I love it. I love it.
it was role play support. That, I think, would probably get closer to what you're talking about, Scribbles.
Mm.
And that would really, it makes a dynamic MMO if the development and the company support that.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
that's
role
music to
players
my
aren't.
ears. I think it's
Yeah.
coming though because like I said with the everybody working from home, you can pay a guy maybe $50,000 in Lincoln, Nebraska. You can pay two of those guys for 100 grand instead of one of those guys in San Diego.
Hmm.
I think it's just it could happen.
The remote
Um,
thing is going to open up a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
My brother is somewhat out. I mean, he understands remote, but he also still runs, I mean, because he's working with me in game development for 7 years now, but he's also still has the cattle ranch and then he has his excavation company. And those are two things that you have to be physical. But we were going over things the other night and I was showing him there's a report that just came out that said 40% of the jobs in the UK have already been confirmed they're not going back to physical. So
Hmm.
40, that's a huge fucking
It's
number.
a lot of
Almost
people.
half of all the jobs in the UK are not going to go back to physical offices. They're going to remain remote. And we're seeing every day there's a press release. I think Google was last week, I think. They said
Yeah.
20% are full time work from home and then 60% get 2 days at home. But the world is shifting.
Yeah.
And on that remote note, for game development, it's nothing but good things in terms of costs,
Hopefully, yeah.
theoretically.
Yeah.
For indies, great. It's
Yeah.
huge.
Oh, yeah.
Um, mm, but yep, I do think it's getting better. If you want to get into like things like the crafting system in MMORPGs,
What?
that's really important. My colleague says every time that he's out that the best crafting system that he's ever played was Star Wars Galaxies. I wonder if you guys think the same way.
No, I
No.
don't.
Uh,
I
I hate crafting.
okay.
It's important. It's important. I have the attention span of a garden gnome.
Oh.
Like I have one that's been broken and has its head buried in the sand. I can do it and I will do it. I don't enjoy it. I've not ever had a
I'm the
crafting
same way
sim
with
for me.
Ashen. I'd have to agree with Ashen. I
So,
think we got too much ADHD
Hmm.
for the slowness. So if you could speed it up at points,
no,
would
no,
that?
no, no, no.
Yeah, and some are like
Yeah.
I'm level 50 on every crafting thing in ESO, it was fairly easy. It was straightforward. Then you have ones like Final Fantasy 14 where you can't level like leather worker by itself because you need the ingots that come from forging. And to do the forging, you need the stuff that comes from alchemy. So you
Interdependency.
have to do all of them or buy it, which is expensive, which is why, every guide you look at for a game like Final Fantasy 14, they're like, yeah, don't craft until you hit max level and you got a butt ton of money to just throw at this thing because that's the only way it's going to happen.
So I can actually come at this from another angle because I am a. So my background is raid leader for many, many, many years, but and role player at the same time. Server first, world first. I've done all that for way too
Hmm.
many years that I care to count. But I've also always been hardcore into crafting. And for me, there are things about the Star Wars Galaxy's crafting that are they were so unique in terms of everything you make is a unique item and it's not
Hmm.
like something anybody else made. That was amazing. The fact that everything you make can be placed into a house, that was
That was
amazing.
awesome.
There are things from that system that are amazing, but for me, the one that takes the cake is Vanguard for crafting, and it's a combination of two things. It's a combination of just how complex the crafting system was, and also the fact that you had group harvesting. So instead of just
Yeah, that
harvesting
doesn't
by
happen often.
yourself, you could go harvest nodes with a group and you would get more yield, higher chance of rares, so on and so forth. And this was for me, and for our guild, one of the ways we approached that is that we didn't we didn't just raid. Any sort of guild event would earn you DKP, and we did many types of guild events. Guild events counted. If it was a role play event, you're earning DKP. If you're showing up at a raid, you're getting DKP. If you show up at a guild meeting, you're earning DKP. And if you come to guild harvesting night, you earn DKP. So we hosted every single week. We would have a couple of raid nights, a couple of harvesting nights, a couple of role play nights, and guild meeting nights. And the harvesting nights were great because it'd be like this group's going to go do ore, this group's going to go do harvesting, this group's going to do leather, this group's going to do mine, minerals, so on and so forth. And by doing that, we overcame the challenge of what you were just describing in Final Fantasy 14, which is that if you have an
Hmm.
because Vanguard was also very interdependent, you had to have it. So was EQ2 in the beginning. You
That
used
was
to
the
have
same
to.
EQ2 devs that are right. They branched off and made Vanguard. Is that
Well, that was
remember?
EverQuest 1
Right,
folks, yeah.
EverQuest. Yeah, they branched off
And
and
then
okay. I
some
was
of them
making sure I
came.
got the right MMO.
Yeah, and then some of them came back to EQ2 and then went back when Sony picked up Vanguard for the year
Right.
and a half or how many years it was. But the interesting thing about if you're doing it with a guild, then even if it's an interdependent system, it works because as long as the leadership is doing things the way it should be done because then
Right.
everybody's putting everything into one place for the crafters and we had people who didn't even do any adventuring whatsoever. They only crafted. So the guild's going out and bringing them supplies. They're using those supplies. They are making top end gear for our adventurers, which enabled us to go and do the raids and the dungeons and everything else. And it was a nice, interbalanced, interconnected system. But it does require a hell of a lot of teamwork
Right.
and a hell of a lot of coordination to make that work. Because otherwise, like you said, the easy way to do it, because I've done EQ2 crafting many, many times. I've done Lord of the Rings Online crafting many, many times. And those systems used to be interdependent, and now they are not. But when they used to be interdependent, the easy solution was you create an alt. Because who wants to pay the freaking
Right.
obnoxious rates that people are charging on the auction hall? So you just spend some time and make it on your own. Um,
Right.
but crafting wise, sorry, you got me off on a rant. Um,
Yeah.
Mhm.
there are things I really like about the Star Wars Galaxy's crafting system, but for me, the one that takes the cake has always been the Vanguard system because of the group harvesting and then the complexity of the actual crafting itself and the way you could just modify every single item based on the quality rating of the wood, the essences that you're putting in. You could choose to go for quality or quantity, and there's just so many variables that you could change during the crafting system. I think for me, and early EQ2 had a very unique crafting system, but it was extremely interdependent. Like you couldn't make a sword
Hmm.
unless you were also working with a leather worker to make the grips, and at that
Yeah, it
point,
was all, those were both old Vanguard and
yeah,
EverQuest too. That's just it's a type of MMO that just I don't think would work well today. I think there was somebody that
no,
that tried it. No, that like recently they were trying. There that was what they were saying. Is it like I don't know, what was one of those ones that's not out yet, like Pantheon or something like that?
it probably was ours also because
Yeah, yeah. There's yeah.
doing
There's
Saga
that.
Blucemia, I was heavily um, working on that crafting system being like Vanguard, and it was very much interdependent and stuff. But I think they're the two that are on the market that are kind of doing that are Pantheon and Saga was when I was still involved. I have no idea
Yeah,
what they're doing now, but yeah.
but yeah, that's that crafting is one. But real quick too. So one thing obviously that makes for me is always the biggest difference, and I like each kind of one. The type of servers they use. Like
Mm.
how ESO uses a mega server, which they claim everyone's on the same server. Well, yeah, except we're not
Eh,
because we're all in instances. I mean, we're on the same server and we can go between it, but it's not like the Oasis from Ready Player One, where you're literally all in the exact same place. Or do you prefer zones, zone shards? You know, the servers, or should you be able to
that's a good
jump
question.
between the servers?
I think the mega server works in a degree because one of the things that I always hated, this is one of the things I really hated about World of Warcraft. You have to have a European client or an American or a US client. Why? Like
Hmm.
I have both by the way because I've tried with European friends and I've tried with US friends, so I've had to buy both clients. And EverQuest split it up to where you had European servers or US servers, and they also had oceanic servers and all this other
Oceanic,
stuff.
yeah.
But it just splits the community up too much. And in an international world that we're living in, I prefer the mega server approach so that we can get everybody in one place. And yeah, there are limitations to that because you do have to use some form of instancing, sharding,
Right.
whatever the case may be. But I do like that approach better. Um, as long as you provide the players some sort of, easy way to connect with each other so that if I'm playing in Europe and I log on and you're in a different shard, we can group up and move to the same shard together. That makes it all work in my mind.
Yeah, well, even with ESO, they use the mega servers, but even that still is divided up between continents. Like they still have the European
European
mega
mega,
server
you're
and
right,
the
they do.
and the American.
Is
Even with that, it's still
is there any
that
game that has like a single international mega server?
man, not
Ping
that
ping
I
would be
know of.
terrible. You couldn't. It's hard. It's
It's
hard
got to
for
be the ocean. The distance is
this.
maybe when we get Elon Musk's Starlink, up in the sky or something, some crazy, Tony Stark level technology. 5G supposedly is going to really
Yeah.
really great for that stuff. Maybe then we can,
Mm.
but it's
Yes.
a lot of it's just technological,
Mm. Yeah.
holdbacks. You just
Yeah.
can't do stuff.
The Fed Night is going with the mega server, and we are going regions. So North America, South America.
Right.
Then you got European areas and Africa. Um, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough to get that ping down. So
Yeah, just I mean,
yeah.
the speed of light is really fast, but you go over a certain amount of distance, you really start to notice that it's not as fast as it really seems like,
Mm.
you know.
Right. And you can't have people like on the same server like having this massive difference in ping. It's just not fun. Um,
But if there's one thing I've learned over the years is MMO players love rubber banding. It's just one of
mm,
their favorite things. Everybody loves that, or skill delay. That's just,
mm,
I mean, who doesn't
that's the
love?
best thing.
who
You
who
walk up and
doesn't?
then all of a sudden you're back here.
Yeah,
Now, to
It's
when
just
I remember back in the day, you could actually leverage that to your advantage in
yeah,
EverQuest One
yes.
because what we used to do when you're running across the Eastern Wastes to get to TOV would just be you start
No,
running, unplug your modem, and then plug it back in 15, 20 seconds later, and
oh wow,
hopefully,
you did that.
you stayed connected, and then poop, you pop up on the other side of the zone after it
mhm.
catches up with you.
No, I would never. That sounds like something people that
That
break terms
sounds
of service would do, and
yes.
I would never do such a thing.
EULA doesn't like you.
Yeah. Expect a
Uh,
knock from Blizzard on your door any moment now.
good times,
Yes.
good
Um,
times.
so yeah, I agree with you. I like the mega server thing for it, but at the same time too, Final Fantasy 14 recently, within the last few years, they've done the server shards. You know, you're on Balmung, which was an overloaded server because it was the unofficial roleplay server, and everyone wanted to be on there, but you couldn't create a character on there for years. And then they introduced a thing where if you were in a certain data center, which is, you know, the building location, I guess, where all those servers were, you could then go from, say, Mateus or Mateu or Matera or whatever it was and jump to Balmung and actually play and role play in the Balmung server. And it would just put your, after your name, it would say what server you're from. And then they opened that up to all the data centers so that if you have a friend on Zalaria and you're on Balmung, you guys can just go over to his server and you guys can play. It's instanced stuff, and it's not a mega server in the official term, but they found a way to make it work like that, and that boosted the game in ways that I don't think they even working on that probably fully understood because I see those little server shards running around when I'm out there, or the server names after like half the
Everybody's
people
names.
when I'm running around.
You bring up something because didn't I haven't played World of Warcraft enough to know this, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, they introduced cross-play between servers with the Dungeon Finder, the matchmaking system, but
With the dungeon finder for sure.
I don't think you can like play with another friend who's on another server that way.
Right.
I think it's
It's
only if
my
the matchmaking thing.
That's my understanding too. World of Warcraft, for as big as it is my biggest MMO knowledge gap. I like
Same
you,
here.
Ren. I
Yeah.
just can't get into it. I'm aware of it. I follow it somewhat. But yeah, a lot. That's another thing is a group finder. Very important in an MMO. Honestly, at this point, I think it's make or break for a lot of them. If you don't have that, I know in the back in the day there's a nostalgia to creating a group, but people these days they don't have. I being an older adult man now, I don't have the time, and most people don't have the patience. So if you don't have that group finder that can just throw you in a queue and 5-10 minutes later, if it's a good game, you're playing your dungeon. That's a very vital thing for me, in especially anything that has group content
I think
or
there's a for me, I look at that and say there are pros and cons.
there are.
I prefer the EverQuest 2 method of, and I say this because it depends on the game I'm playing and what mood I'm in. When I know that I have a full Saturday or Sunday or something dedicated, I don't have a problem going in. I like the EverQuest 2 setup where you can go in and there's a looking for more panel or a looking for group
Right.
panel. You can put yourself up in the panel and people can search that and send you a tell if they want to group up with you. However, when I'm playing Star Wars Old Republic, for example, I just want to be able to kill some droids and blow up some shit. And so I really do like but that's also a game where it's no longer really an MMORPG. It's a single player game with that multiplayer add-on component.
It's
Yeah,
what BioWare does best is single player games. Well,
correct.
till Andromeda, but aside that.
So I like being able to just, in 5 minutes I've got a group, we do the instance, and 45 minutes later I'm back to doing either whatever I was doing before or I'm off to log off and go do something else. But I do miss that the one thing I do miss is that I can tell you I've been playing Star Wars: Old Republic since it came out. I have never met a single, and not one individual in that game who I have felt compelled to have a ongoing relationship with, to group up with in a future session
Mhm.
ever. And that is the one downside that I have to the matchmakers, is that. But if your game is set up in that way, it depends on
Yeah,
what you're trying to accomplish with your game. If you're not worried about if it's like Star Wars: The Republic where it's not a group-based game, then a matchmaking system's fine. But if you're
yeah,
dealing with a game where you want people to be forming relationships because the content is challenging enough that they need good groups to do it, then I think you kind of have to figure out a better way than just a blatant matchmaking system. Because it is, like you said, in today's modern era, I don't want to sit around. I do have the time, but I don't want to. I don't want to sit around for an
right.
hour trying to find somebody. I want to be able to play. So that's a difficult one to
Yeah,
approach.
and at this point, well, and uh, I don't know, I have actually gone back that the Fallen, I want to call it Fallen Order, but that's Jedi Fallen Order. The one
Fallen
with the two
Empire.
twins,
Yeah.
Fallen Empire. Thank you. That was a fantastic Star Wars story,
Yeah, there's
by the
two.
way.
There's it's
Yeah,
Fallen Empire and Eternal Empire.
I played both
That
of
was the
those.
ones I was
Oh
doing
my
back in 2000.
gosh.
Yeah, they were really good.
They're peak Star Wars, Mandalorian style, good Star Wars stories. But if you EverQuest, not EverQuest, but that game and Final Fantasy 14, a lot of their main story quest to progress, you have to you have to do the dungeon, you have to do early on, you had to do the ship, and if
Yeah,
you
well
don't
these
have,
days,
man, these days I
these
doubt it's like that,
no,
but
these days they give you have two options. You can either do it with a flash, you can do the flashpoint with a group and use the matchmaking system, or you can go in alone and do it solo, and they give you this badass robot who comes
right,
along with you,
yes,
and
that's right, I forgot
he's like
about
a
that.
tank and a healer, and so just let him mow things down for you. It's like doing it
Yeah,
on story mode at that point because you're literally never going to get hurt.
see, and
There's no challenge to it, but you still get the story out of it and you still get to
yeah.
progress.
And that's one of my pitfalls too, that I didn't like about the Old Republic, and I don't like in my MMOs is companions. I want to feel like my character doesn't need, anybody else. ESO actually is this here on June 4th, the next expansion.
Companions, yeah.
They're adding companions to a game that is already really easy.
That reminds me of
I it
yeah.
don't know why. EverQuest 2 did that eventually.
So did
It was
EQ1 too, yeah.
EQ1. And to me, that's the sign of a game uh, trying to make up for a lack.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I don't know honestly anybody, especially the role players. Nobody's really excited for it, especially because they're coming out with two. And eventually, want the latest companion? Look in the cash shop. You can buy it in there for 400 crowns, or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah,
Uh,
EverQuest 2, you get a
4,000.
basic one. In EverQuest 1 and EverQuest 2, you get a
My
basic
God.
companion
That's
for
what I'm gonna say.
free, but it costs in-game coin for the upkeep. But then if you want the premium tank or the premium healer or the premium spellcaster, it's in the
Mhm.
cash shop and it's like 10 times as powerful as the freebie ones you get. So anytime you go online and read a guide about what's the best tank, everyone's immediately going to tell you the cash shop one because that's the one that's got 40,000 hit points compared to
Right.
10,000 hit points. It's yeah,
And see, in
absolutely.
that at that point, you're basically I don't know if you've ever played any of the mobile MMOs, which are
Some.
pretty much
I
all
I
bad.
actually have the only one I've kept on my phone for all these years is Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. I play that one every day,
Yeah,
but I don't spend money on it.
yeah.
It's
Well,
a free to
like
play.
Lineage, the Lineage one.
I
There's a
tried
few of
it.
them. You hit one button in the corner, and the damn game plays itself. And that's to me what
Oh, they got auto run and
the
auto
auto
Yeah, that
run,
was
play.
auto
the first
auto
time I came
quest.
across that was Black Desert Online. I tried the mobile version,
Yes,
and it was
yes.
like it would even do it offline for you. Like you could just
Yeah. Why? What am I? This I'm supposed to be. It's a video game you're supposed to play. If I wanted to watch somebody else play this, I would go to Twitch. I don't need to have it loaded in on my phone. But companions are one thing that I think. I know we're talking about what makes a good MMO, but doing
I
that
don't think
is
companions counts.
no companions
Hey,
it's a bad move.
it could be good for mobile games. I mean, that's just you just
Mobile is
want to
yeah.
get through the storyline pretty much with a mobile game. We have a niche, I think, all of us here because we're old school players that
Hmm.
isn't really adaptable
I've
to
been called a boomer MMO
yeah
RPG
yeah.
player, and it made me laugh because
I gotta love that.
I was like, I don't know that I'm old enough to qualify. I'm a millennial. I'm 41, so I'm at the like the beginning of
Yeah.
the millennial, but the end of the boomer. It's like,
I'm de-
You're at the it wouldn't that be
I'm
you'd be Gen
Generation
X?
X. I'm
Yeah,
Gen X.
Gen X. That we're right at
Right
the
here.
end of Gen X. Yeah,
yeah.
So yeah.
Gen X gamers.
So yeah, I mean it's hard to put your finger on it about what could make a good game, but I think a good like for me I still go back to this Kickstarter this one Kickstarter that I thought was the gonna be the best game ever. I thought it was this was the way, like the Mandalorians say.
Hmm.
Um, and that was I just linked it to your account there. This was the Kickstarter for Shards Online. For me,
I
this was what the future was going to be. But it never really happened this way. What it was you could actually host your own servers, and attach the servers to the world, to the massive
yeah.
world. And this was supposed to be, you had your own servers, but you could connect to the official servers. And this was the new way. And they raised a bunch of money. I think it was like
It says
$100 or
105,000, yeah.
Yeah.
$105,000. But this was the most awesome Kickstarter that I can remember. To about that I was all hyped up for, which this could be the future, and I still think it can be the
Could
future
be.
if they did it the way they were supposed to. Um, but it ended up changing hands, and it became Legends of Aria, and it's just not the same thing. So, if you guys have a chance to check out that Kickstarter, if you have some downtime or whatnot, but this was one of the ones where I was so hyped, and this is almost one of the ones where I because it failed, I wanted to get into game development and do my own thing because of this failure. So I think it's a good case study for anybody that thinks that
Mhm.
that they have what it takes to make a new MMORPG. Really good. You guys remember this one?
I
I
do.
was
I
not
I was
familiar with
excited.
this at all. Not
I was
familiar with it at
excited
all.
for this one
I
just
don't.
like you. It fell completely off my radar after I didn't kickstart it because I'm very leery of uh,
Yeah.
kickstart games for obvious reasons. Uh,
Mm,
looking at you, EverQuest landmark, but
right.
I do remember this, and it had a lot of promise. It seemed like it would be the future, and it was a really cool concept to be able to create. It was closer to what I was talking about with the Oasis from Ready Player One, where if you have the central hub of it and it's a certain type, and you just build up your server, it's kind of what my friend Jazz has been doing with Age of Conan. You have you rent the server and you can build that world up as you want. You don't have anything to connect it to. It's all on its own,
Yeah.
but they're building their own. They're building a city. They're building how they can control how XP is. They can control if you lose loot when you die, corpse runs, blah blah blah. I'm Conan Exiles is not my jam. I mean,
Mm-mm.
the Dick Slider thing is about the funniest thing I have about that. It's really all that anybody knew about that, which is weird because Age of Conan also had that, but for some reason this one was the one the media and everybody latched onto. But
Right.
those independent type servers, that is a really cool concept, and
Mhm.
I hope in the future somebody does that.
Yeah. As long
But
as as long as they can hook up to the main one and everybody can
right,
go to different
Because that's kind
areas,
of
you don't have to log into a whole nother server to do
right,
it.
yeah,
It's all connected.
it's
Yeah.
just like zoning. You just zone
Mhm.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
that reminds me. There's a book series by Tad Williams called Otherland, which kind of has that same concept in the sense that the virtual reality is just a bunch of independent private worlds, but once you're in on the net, you can connect to all of them. 'Cause one of the primary character is in real life, he's got this disease, he's bedridden, he's got I forget the name of the disease, but you age really quickly. So he's like a 14-year-old kid who's going to be dead in a few years. But
Benjamin Button.
The
in
reverse Benjamin
game,
Button. Yeah.
he's like Thargor, the most powerful barbarian in this fantasy MMORPG. But then as he gets
Mhm.
together with his friends, they start on this adventure and they end up going to all of these different worlds, and each world has its own unique set of rules that are determined by the person who developed that world, but it's all connected to the same source. I mean, that sounds interesting.
Hmm.
It also sounds like what Dreamworld is promoting on their Kickstarter. Um, but it's an interesting concept. Interesting
did
concept to say the
I did
least.
30 minutes on that, and that was a lot of fun to go down. Thanks for that rabbit hole, by the way, Scribbles. That was 2 hours of my life I can't get back.
Oh yeah, I'm way more than 2 hours in at this point. I'm probably like 20 hours in after watching
Yeah.
all these different content creators. But
Oof.
thinking about that for a minute, when you've got so many different worlds and everything else, this got me back to thinking one of the things I had on the list to talk about, which is everybody's got an opinion on first person versus third person in terms of what is their favorite way to play. And I can say that I have two minds of this, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but on the one hand, from an immersion standpoint, I love first person games because I get a better sense of immersion from those games. But I also know, looking at it from the development standpoint and from a marketing standpoint in the modern era, you need to allow third person if you're going to have streamers and people like that promoting your game for you, because if you don't give them a way to show off their character, they're not going to want to play your game because they want to be able to take selfies and screenshots and everything else. And
Mm,
even playing a game like Cyberpunk 2077 where you have a screenshot mode, it's not the same thing as being in a 3D environment where you could just really quickly hit the mouse, and right click and spin the camera around and take a screenshot. So I like both equally. There are some games I like Lord of the Rings Online. I prefer to play that game in third person, camera panned out as far as I can, because it's majestic, wide open vistas, and I love that. But then if I'm playing like Morrowind or Oblivion or Skyrim, I love that first
mhm,
person. Like I'm really looking forward to the game that Obsidian is developing. It's their new IP that they're doing, which is going to be a first person game. I like Cyberpunk 2077.
mhm.
I like first person. I do a lot, but I also like third person. I don't think that one or the other is better than the other, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
I can hit it. Yeah. So as long as it doesn't give you a advantage, is what I'm talking about. People like so when you're really close up in the first person, I think you can't really see what's going on behind you. But if you pull it out a little bit, then you kind of see more, and for PvP play and everything, everybody pulls it out because they can see everything coming.
Right.
So you really got to think about what your design is.
Hmm.
If it's going to be a survival game, and first person is what you want in there, that's what you got to keep it as. But if you're one of those games where panning back is what you're going for, hey, do that. But I think there is a criteria you have to match if your game's a PvP game or a PvE game. So it all depends about that too.
I
What
think
do you
that
guys think?
you just brought
Yeah.
something up in my mind. I was remembering early EverQuest 1, when it used to just be the box, and it was
Oh,
surrounded
jeez.
by the buttons. It was
Mhm.
first personally, and the
The
worst
UI
part,
is awful.
the
Yeah.
UI was awful, which we
Mm,
should segue into in a minute. But the thing that I remember
Mhm.
was when you had to bury your face in the book to meditate. If you
Mhm.
were a spellcaster, you were well and truly fucked in terms of like what was going on around you,
yeah, it was terrible.
unless you had people there to be on the lookout. Um, and pulling was a pain in the butt. But once they added that third person, pulling became a lot easier because you could go up to a corner, pan the camera out, and then swing it around, and you could sometimes get the camera to let you
Yeah,
have that
it's,
view
it's
around the corner.
I
Yeah,
think
it's
it's
like
important to have everybody the same. If you're going to do it the same, they have the option to be equal. So I think that's the best way to do it.
yeah, it really does come down to the combat design and the mechanics of the game itself. Like the old ones, you could do both, first and third person. I actually started when I play EverQuest. I was exclusively first person. I thought people that played the game in third person were wacky weirdos because, well, part of it was because you would see the halflings if you were playing one of those horrible, disgusting, creatures, especially when they had
I
Spirit of
love
Wolf
Catholics, buddy.
and their little feet were like
Yeah, the
like that.
little
I
speed
hated
feet.
those creepy little. It's just awful. But
Wood elf for the
later on,
win.
EverQuest 2, Final Fantasy, even in uh, Elder Scrolls Online, I play only person now. And I don't get me wrong, I'm like you. I love my first person games. I love Obsidian's. What was that? The recent MMO they did that was a Fallout like, but it wasn't Fallout. It was like Other
Oh,
Worlds,
Other
Outer
Worlds?
World,
Yeah, Outer
Outer
Worlds.
Worlds.
Outer Worlds.
That game is fantastic.
Haven't played
Cyberpunk,
that
as
one
long as
yet.
you played it on P. Oh, if you like Fallout, play Outer Worlds. You'll love it.
Okay. No, I love all of
It's
their games. It's one of the few Obsidian games I haven't played.
Yeah, very well worth it. Cyberpunk, as long as you played it on PC.
This is yeah, I have it on PS4, and
Oh
I
wow.
actually suffered through the bugs and played it when it first came out. I spent about 3 weeks Suffered through. It crashed so many fucking times. I
Oh
quit
man.
streaming. I was 3 episodes in and I quit streaming because I had one session where it crashed 7 times in 15 minutes, and I said I can't stream this game.
Wow.
But I still played it, had fun. I just recently went back because they've done all the patches now over the last few
Right.
months. I've played 3 sessions over the last week. If this is the way it would have launched,
It would have been
there are
fine.
still some hitching issues on the PS4, but for the most part, it's running smooth as silk now.
Yeah.
But
And it's
yeah,
so but like I love my first person games. I love the shooters. I play a lot of different video games. But when it comes to MMOs, I have grown into, and just the way and like I keep bringing up Final Fantasy 14, that game, I don't think it even has a first person perspective. You can get in close to your character and you can get over the shoulder, but it doesn't have first person
yeah, I don't think it does either.
because
I've only played
yeah,
it a couple
because the
times, but
mechanics
yeah.
in that, when you're with the dodging and DP, good rule of thumb for DPS, don't stand in the giant red circle. Yeah, don't do that. So in first person, you can't see the giant red circle or the cone if you're too close. So that's why they force the third person perspective. Now you can control the camera and blah blah blah, but that is their design choice. So everybody, like Scribbles is saying, you're on the same playing field, as opposed to a game like to the EverQuest looking around the corner, or the PUBG joke where your character is just staring at a wall, but the camera's over here looking at the guy that thinks he's hidden behind a tree. That's the cheat on that, and it does definitely give you a different advantage. But and of course, and then there's the old way. I mean, let's not forget the classic isometric, over the top, Ultima Online Ragnarok look. I mean, let's not completely dismiss that in this modern 3D era. That's still a thing, right? We can just do the over
Are
the
there
top.
any are there any MMORPGs that use that? I feel like there's one.
Um,
I saw it recently and I can't remember the name of it because it was like this. It is another indie. It's another indie
it's an
project.
indie one. I know a lot of them. Was it Albion, Ragnarok?
Ah,
Those
thank you. I
all
think it was
still use
Albion.
that. Is it Albion?
I think it's
Yeah.
Albion.
RuneScape is that. I mean, that's an old one, but still that isometric view. That's one that doesn't really seem to come up. It's kind of. I mean, people still play those by the tens
Yeah,
and
people
hundreds
play
of
the
thousands.
crap out of that game.
Yeah.
Great system too. It's I think you can trade up in skills. You can trade up in
hmm
all the skills. Kind of a different way to do it.
Uh, or
Um,
or there is the one that doesn't it gets a lot of attention, but it actually does have a lot of players, but it's their second job, Eve Online, the space
oh
sim.
my god, that's a great game.
Yeah.
So many players you could play with. It's probably one of the
Yeah,
if
I
you're gonna call a game an MMORPG, that's the game that you call
and
MMORPG.
I there you go. There's one that I think that is one that has a true mega server. Because I don't think there is instancing. Because I've seen, you see those things where there's a giant war where like $100,000 in real world dollars in ships are destroyed, and the server, what do they call it? Time dilation.
Yeah,
Going back
time.
to Stargate.
Yeah.
They have to time dilate because there's so many people in one section of space that the servers are,
I
the poor
can't
little
think of another
hamster.
game that does it like that. I think you're right. I think that's
I
like the
think Eve is it.
closest one we can get to saying it's a true multi-server, multiplayer, massively
Yeah.
thing.
No instant, as far as I know, and I'm not a Eve player. I definitely don't have that time in my life.
So yeah, the next one is Camelot Unchained. We're gonna see that
Oh
here
yeah.
soon. Uh, I heard like 5,000 players in one area. I'm like, wow, amazing. So we'll see. We'll see how
We'll
that
see.
goes.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's fun, but I mean, people could love people. Just
Right.
that's just me. So
Yeah, it's not my jam either. Of course, that's PvP kind of stuff, and I'm not much. I like PvP in by Call of
oh,
Duties, but not so much in my
And my
MMOs.
MMORPGs, I'm PvE only.
hmm
The only time I've ever enjoyed PvP is like you said, shooters, like Halo. Fucking loved it.
Right.
I've not played, here's the funny thing about the Call of Duty games. I love the Call of Duty games for the single player campaigns.
Yeah.
I don't like the multiplayer components, but I have like last year I played for about 4 months with my two cousins and their dad. I grew up with them, and we used to play GoldenEye on the N64 and have
Oh
like
man.
we'd stay up 3 nights in a row, and being teenagers, and my uncle was a really cool uncle who would stay up all night with us and say, "Screw my day job, I'm gonna play with you guys." So I've gone and played
Awesome.
Warzone with
That's
them over
awesome.
the years, once in a while, and I enjoy it when I'm with them, but I have
Right.
zero enjoyment when I try to play it by myself, like joining up with like a random group.
The randos, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like doing it with randos, but I did. I mean, thinking back to Halo, I always played with friends though, so it was a little different because even if you're doing,
Yeah.
PvP, it's like you're doing it with
Yeah.
people you know, and so there's a
Yeah.
certain level of intimacy to I'm gonna kick your ass as opposed to some random stranger. And it's all fun and
Oh,
games because it's your friends.
yeah. And the balancing in PvP and MMOs is a completely different beast than a multiplayer like Call of
Yeah.
Duty or Halo. Because, I mean, there's always a meta. There's just no way around that. It's math. There's some sort of a meta, and once people know which character is,
The
the
best.
character,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it really is there, and it's always a balancing act. And certain games like Final Fantasy 14 ESO, they have Final Fantasy 14's PvP, as far as I know, is practically dead until there's an event where there's rewards that come out of it. Other than that, there's a few committed people, but man, that is not what that game is about. ESO does better with its, you know, uh, Camelot like 3v3 realm thing, but I don't enjoy it, and you go in there unprepared and you get melted. Your face is gone in 3 seconds, and that's not fun. It's a tough balancing act to
Mm,
balance PvP in an MMO.
mm.
Yeah, I'm not a
Yeah,
big
I
fan.
think for me, um, keeping it lower player volume is the best way to do it. Two groups go at it in a kind of scenario that they can
Upball.
achieve
I was just getting
greatness.
ready to say up. That's epic.
It's a dumb game, but it was actually a lot of
It's
fun.
fun. It's fun. It is a super dumb game, but it does provide that group versus group thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's my favorite way to play
Hmm. It's a
PvP
lot
game.
easier to balance that too than the
I
realm
don't
versus
like
realm versus
I don't
realm.
like getting sniped from way beyond, and then you're just way back here, and then you get hit, and you're like, what the hell
Yeah.
is going on?
Oh, and if you
And
spend
like
a lot of
you
time,
can't do anything.
no, and if you spend a lot of time watching the Warzone, like one of my favorite things on TikTok is when I'm scrolling through TikTok is you'll see people who put up these crazy clips of things they do in Warzone. And like I was watching one the other night where this guy literally his strategy is because you get the guys who they get the snipers who camp the rooftops. So he'll
Hmm.
he'll he'll run into the building and he'll get down at the bottom of the stairwell and he'll call in an airstrike at the top. And then he'll switch to a missile launcher and he'll point it up at the top of the stairwell. And as soon as everybody runs inside to hide from the airstrike, he launches a missile
Nice.
at the top of the stairwell and wipes him out. And it's like that's interesting, but it's also I- it is a strategy, but
It's a strategy. I
at the
mean,
same time, it's like it's no different than getting sniped from 50 miles away. It's like, damn it,
yeah.
like I didn't even see where did that come from? What happened? You don't really know. Um, and one I
You
watched yesterday was really funny. Was this helicopter came in, landed, and everybody ran into the deep to the I forget what they're called. It's not a depot, but it's like one of those ammo stash places that have all the special weapons and stuff. You gotta have a code to
right,
get
yeah.
into. So helicopter drops. They all run in. The guy was waiting at the entrance with C4. He runs up, throws the C4 on the side of the helicopter, runs back up the hill. They all come out after they've armed up, pile in this helicopter,
Mhm.
take off, and he just hits a button, and it's just
Just
boom.
boom. Nice.
And it's
I
like
love I love stuff
it's
like that.
it's funny as hell, but it's also imagine being the person in the helicopter. You thought you were in the clear,
Yeah.
and
We're in the
then
clear. We got all
boom.
the legendary relics and, good guns and
Oh
whatnot. And
man.
no, no, you just came in 27th. Yeah. So, I gotta say too. I mean, if we're gonna talk about what makes an MMO great. For me
Sure.
personally, obviously, it's the end game glamoring, clothing, armor. I mean, what else is there? If you don't have that, that's actually one
Cause
of the reasons I hated EverQuest too. At the beginning, was that first year, 6 months to a year. If you remember, the armor was garbage. For one, the hats never looked good.
no,
They were
it's
just awful, so
eh,
bad.
this
But that
this
first six
yeah.
month period, I lasted 6 months in EverQuest 2 before I went back. I think after the Soga models, the Korean ones came out, the anime looking things. and I played with those. But the the armor there was like it seemed like maybe 10 sets of armor
I don't even
for
know. There wasn't even
it
that.
was so bad.
Like if you
And that was
remember,
like between all the classes.
yeah, like for example, the plate. It was the
Yeah.
same model of plate. They just changed the texture on it depending on what
Mm-hmm.
tier you were. So you had 7 tiers, crafting wise
Right.
for that first level 1 to 50, and it was just different texture. So you'd get a different texture and color, but it was the exact same plate mail,
Mm-hmm.
chain mail, cloth. So it was literally you had 4 sets of gear, and that was it. I agree. The hats thing drives me nuts because um, I say this because I have a lore master on Lord of the Rings Online, and I was just like yesterday, I think, or this morning, I don't remember when it was. Like, it's too many hours in the day. I was streaming and I did this scenario where we were going into Orthanc and Gandalf's on the top of the tower with Saruman, and I'm looking at Gandalf's robes and his cloak and his hat and his staff, and I'm like, why can't I find like there's nothing in the
Well,
game that looks as cool as that? I've come kind of close with a couple things,
right.
but I can't find a good staff, and there's no good hats that look like Gandalf's hat. So you're stuck with just I'm not going to wear a hat.
You're, you're
And
stuck with the great value brand Gandalf. It's kind of close, but it's also just, it's the Walmart brand. We all know it when we see it.
but we were talking about this a little bit before the show. I was saying that Star Wars: Old Republic, you can't turn the helmet off unless you're a subscriber. And so I
Oh,
will 100%. I think now you can buy it with. I think you can actually buy it with cartel points. But
yeah, you
I
could buy additional
100%
things.
want the option to turn my frickin' helmet off because very rarely do I find any sort of headgear that matches the look I want for your character. But you just brought something very important up because I can remember in EverQuest 1, I wanted my ranger to have that black chainmail armor that came out of Runny Eye. The Runny Eye, I
Oh
can't remember,
yeah.
the Runny Eye Black Scale or whatever it was called for my ranger.
Hmm.
And so I went there and I farmed for months to get a full set of black chainmail armor for my ranger. It's no magical stats or anything else. And at the time, they didn't have a separate cosmetic slot set, so it was just I just wanted that so that I could run around on my ranger and look like a badass wood elf ranger in black chainmail.
Yeah.
Um, and that was one of those things where you would spend months hunting that down, and then once you got into raiding, it was like, okay, well, I need the hunter set or the whatever set, and so you would spend additional months raiding just so you could get that set of cosmetic gear so that you could get your character to look like the way you want your character to look. So cosmetic options,
Very important. It's very important. What do you guys feel about having to buy this stuff? I mean, you can be cool, just buy it.
man.
Uh, what? Come on,
I,
guys. What do you feel
so
about that?
having
Do you like to work
Off
for it?
marketplace or
Do you
off the
like
crown store?
do you like to work for it and to be cool, or what's going on? Do you like transmog or how what's cool to you guys?
I'm of two minds of this because you have to remember, having spent the last many years of my life designing a game that was telling people we weren't going to allow you to have a cosmetic cash up. You were going to have to earn it in the game. I'm of two minds of this because even though I said that, and I do prefer that method, I'm also the type of person who will not play my Lotro character or my Star Wars: Old Republic character unless it looks the way I want it to look. I
Hmm.
don't want to wear the shit they give me from quests. I want to look like the way I want to look. So there's a part of me that says I remember the way it used to be, and people you'd run into Kellethan and Greater Fate. You'd be hanging out at the bank, and you'd be sitting there with your as a ranger.
You
You'd be
look like
sitting
a
there with
hot
your
mess.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but no, I mean after you've been raiding for a while, you're sitting there. You got your
Oh,
two epic
Oh yeah.
swords. You got lightning effects going off from your weapons. You're in this full set of cool green
that's
and
cool. And
brown
everybody
leather.
looks up at you and they're
Hmm.
like, "Oh my God, you're great. You're
What
an
did you
awesome
do?
guy."
You're a
Yeah.
badass. I wish I could be like you. I do miss that aspect. There is a certain allure to that. Absolutely. And I think that's for me, I think that's an important aspect of an MMORPG. At the same time,
Hmm.
at the same time, every game under the sun offers you cosmetic options. If you don't have that in your game, it's like you're not even a real MMORPG. It's like
It's gonna hurt your player. It's gonna hurt
it's
your
going to hurt your player
numbers, your
base.
sales.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially if you can't turn your helmet off. That was the big thing,
And make it easy, please, for the love of God. Like, don't make me go into like 14 settings menus just to turn off my character's helmet. Just a easy button inside the character screen would be good. Thank you.
That was
That
one of the
works.
things that Shroud of the Avatar did not have for a very long time. Is they even after the game went live, they wouldn't let you turn your helmet off. And I'd say there's probably a dozen people that I know personally who would not play that game because they
Mhm.
are streamers and they can't turn the helmet off, and they're like, I can't get my character to look the way I want. I don't want to play this game. Like, eh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where you have to face that reality these days.
And I've done what you've done. For me, I was a druid. The no skin tunic. I had to look it up because I remember Tower of Frozen Shadow. It was black too, but it was that one that was a solid black. There was no texture to it. It was just you were just in a black latex or nylon suit, not latex suit, whatever it was. And I loved it. I did like you did. I ground for it. But at the same time, now uh, there's you nobody wants their character to look like they just came out of the uh, Goodwill store down the street and they only had $5 in their bank account to clothe themselves as best as they could. And
I kind of
but
like that. I kind of like that. You just get what you can to like early on. It's like, hey, you
maybe
can
early on,
yeah.
but well, like Final Fantasy 14, bringing that up again,
Mm.
you unlock that. It's after a certain level where you unlock the ability to do your aesthetics and actually do that. But you still have to actually get the items and transfer them in there. You still have to either buy it off the marketplace, get it, or some of them, which is the hybrid system I like, is that some things you can sell off the market, but then there's other things that are bound. They're basically bound loot. You have to go out there and physically get it, and that's often the coolest looking stuff. And I'm doing it right now. I'm doing a quest for my ninja knives. I've got to do the quest. I can't just buy this for the. It's as aesthetic. They're not as good as what I'm going to get, at level 50 when the game goes up to level 80. But I like the look, so I'm going
Yeah,
to
I
do the
just
quest.
finished up I guess this is Sunday, right? So yeah, I played Lotro this
Yeah.
morning. I've been up since like 5 o'clock. So I was streaming this morning, and I actually finished up the quest line today for it's this quest line that you do part of the epic quest, and the reward is you get a set of the Dunedain gear, so you can actually look like one of the rangers of the Grey Company that ride with the
Oh yeah.
Aragorn. But it's right before Rohan, and you have like the only way to get it is you have to do the epic book quests and follow them in order and actually grind it out to get that gear set. And it's purely cosmetic, and you have two options that you can choose from. But I got it today, and it was like this. It's this moment of like, ah, yes, finally,
Mm-hmm.
because you've been playing for 6 months, and you finally got to the point where you've got that gear. Um, and the only way you can get that gear, the only way, is to do those quest lines. You can't buy it in the store. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
one good thing I can say for Lord of the Rings Online is there's a lot of stuff that you can get from the game and only from the game, and then there's a lot of stuff you can get from the store and only from the store. I think it's okay to have both because you're fulfilling the needs of two player bases at that point. You're
Mm-hmm.
giving the players who want to earn something the ability to go out there and do so, and then you're giving the players who want the ability to just spend some points and get it to do that as well. And I'll admit, some of my characters, I'll have 2 or 3 sets of gear. And that's the one nice thing about, say, Lotro is, and I know they do it in Star Wars: The Republic too, is you get like a couple of cosmetic slots for free. So you can have 2 sets of gear for free. But then if you want set 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you pay, and you can
Mm-hmm.
unlock a third set, a fourth set, a fifth set, a sixth set of cosmetic gear. So you can have all these different role play sets of cosmetic gear, which I think is a great way to do it. Um, because again, you're fulfilling both of the player base's needs. You're making sure that there's some things that you can only earn and some things that you can just say,
Mm-hmm.
screw it, I'll spend points or
Mm.
cash
Right.
because I do
Yeah,
like
I like
Man,
the
playing.
hybrid.
I do like my cosmetics these days. I used to be very hard, and this is funny because when I
Mm,
started designing um, on Saga, so let's think back 2014, I was very hardcore. I want this game to only be only be, earn you wear what you earn. But at the same time, it's hard for me to say that that is the only way I roll because like
Mm,
there are hundreds of armor sets in Star Wars: Old Republic, like on the store. My brother and I
yeah,
have spent probably by this point we've spent 50, 60 hours of real time where we just sit there and we're like browsing through the outfits and going, "Ooh,
there's
we're
a
gonna make new
lot.
character sets. What do we want this character to look like?" And there's like 30 different pistols that you could choose from, and they don't give you any more damage. They're just skins. It's just
Yeah.
skins, which I guess Warframe does that as well. I'm not intimately familiar with that game, but that's one of the things that they do really well
yeah, but
is
the
the
thing you
skins.
thing you need to think about is the game needs to have a look to it too. So you have to have
Hmm.
progression that makes you look cool as well. You need to think about both those. I love it when role players say, "Hey, I want this. I want the wedding gear. I want, this is crazy stuff that role players love. I love it. They want leather gear. They want, silk. They want there's certain areas that's cool to pay for because you could just like, hey, this is this extra added value for
Yeah.
those people. But when you, I think when you get the chance to get to think about it, what makes you want to play the game more and more and more and more, it's the progression to look fabulous. So
Hmm.
I
There,
think you need to
true end
really
game.
think about that, um, if you want to balance those
Yeah,
parts.
that's why I said I like the hybrid thing, where some certain things, and honestly, well, speaking of the old Republic, like the crates have just the economy in that game is just destroyed. I mean, nothing. The most basic stuff is in the millions
Millions.
already.
Yeah.
Million. It's just destroyed. But um, Final Fantasy 14, which I looking through there, it's the good looking stuff that's a little more difficult to get. Even though it is sold on there, it is still cost prohibitive. Not forever, but you do have to do a certain amount of work just to be able to get the money. And at that point, you might be able to just go get it yourself, unless it's crafted. It's crafted stuff, and it's again, I've been over that. Um, but I like you're absolutely right. It does have there has to be a goal in mind, but at the same time, it's an MMO. That goalpost
Right.
is constantly being pushed back. So what used to be a little harder to get will then become easier, and then it will become normal. But that's why you still have to come out with something new, and you have to keep you. We
I,
literally, you're always moving the goalposts to
right.
something new, to
I
and
mean,
new and shiny.
I,
Move that
I
carrot.
I totally understand it though because I
Yeah.
like if I get into a game, I want to like if I'm the blacksmith and I'm RPGing as a blacksmith, I want to get my gear right away. I'll be that
Mhm.
blacksmith, but I don't want to have the best looking blacksmith gear. I just want something that makes me look like a blacksmith. I totally get it. Totally get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think gear progression is an interesting thing because not everyone gives a shit about the look of their character.
I
Some people,
totally get it.
but I. It's funny because back in the day I cared less about it, but then as I got older and as I got more into MMORPGs, I became more and more obsessed with. Like I can remember when dyes, like armor
That was
dye. I
big.
think it was Guild Wars 1 was when I first got introduced to like dyes for your armor.
Like it
That
was EverQuest for me. Like it was like Lucklin or something that when
Hmm.
for me was the dies.
Maybe that's the game. Maybe it was the EverQuest one, but I remember it. There's something in my mind that remembers Guild Wars 1 being the one where I really got hooked on dying. But I do remember it being in EverQuest 1 at some point. I just don't remember
I think
when.
the biggest thing I remember that came when it came to clothing and aesthetics was, in the era of EverQuest, you couldn't have capes. But Dark
Nope.
Age of Camelot came out with capes,
Yep.
and guess who was the big boy on? That was a huge. And don't get me wrong, it was basically a folded block of polygons. It was a terrible cape, but it was a cape, and people went crazy for that game. Not just because the Realm versus Realm was really good, the PvP was good. It was a pretty
Cosmetics.
good game. It was that you could wear a stupid cape.
And that was the
Yeah.
big
Guess what?
selling point for EverQuest 2 when it came out was
EverQuest too. Yep.
you could design a guild cloak with your own
Yeah.
emblem on it.
Oh, I was
Hmm.
just gonna say that because you could like, attach the power of your guild into
Hmm.
the stigma.
And
FYI,
now they don't do
that's
that.
FYI the most important thing for me anytime I play Lotro now, every single new character, the most important thing is the cape. I must. My brother laughed at me because we started these new characters back in November on a server. We started from scratch and everything else, and I was off. I had old characters that were high level, so I went off and was farming ore and selling it on the market. And then I went and dropped 100 gold on, which is a stupid amount of money for something, but I bought it was a 50 gold cloak, and then the green because there's like 30 different types of dye in
Yeah, they're
Lotro,
very detailed.
and the dye that I wanted was 50 gold for one vial of the dye. So I spent 100 gold to get the cloak and the dye that I wanted for my Hobbit. But this is the Hobbit that I'm going to be playing for the next, couple of years. So I was like, I'm doing
Hmm.
it. Like I'm totally doing it, And
Yeah.
it also, however, I didn't get him at level 1. It was, I think it was around level 30 was when I finally decided that I was going to worry about the cosmetic stuff because the first 30 levels they go by
Yeah, it
so
goes by like
quick.
that.
It's like we were just playing the game, but at some point you start to worry about it, and it's like we got to get the guild house and we got to get everything decorated the way we wanted. Now we got to make sure they've got the right cloaks and
Right.
your
Yeah.
Hobbit has to look a certain way. Now we need the certain pipes, and you can get different pipes from different quests, and they all have a different graphic, and yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
The irony. Oh, I was gonna say the irony too is how big capes were, and I think now in modern MMOs, I think the last thing that had capes was like City of Heroes or Champions, the superhero ones. I don't know a current like Final Fantasy doesn't really have cloaks. ESO doesn't have cloaks. I don't know that any like within the last 5, 6, 7 years comes out using
Shroud.
colors with them
It was
anymore.
big deal in Shroud of the Avatar, but I don't. That's a hard one to
Oh
sell because
yeah,
it's not really a AAA game. It's a
yeah.
I have cloaks. So I just want to bring it
Yeah.
back a little bit on what makes a good game. So I I want to say for me, I was thinking the complexity of the game too. Do you
Hmm.
guys ever go into a game like that's too complex? I don't like having to have a PhD to understand the game.
Eve
Like I
Online.
yeah, same exact thing. When I went into I thought the dying and death system and Chronicles of Valyria was great. I thought that was innovative and everything. Loved it. But then they started talking about there's an erosion system that brings uh you know needed nutrients to the environment. I'm like, the fuck, dude? I don't need to have a astronomy degree to understand the game. They were doing the astronomy in the game, and they were doing the erosion of plant material, and I was like, what? Just make a game, dude.
Yeah.
Make it as simple as possible. Do not deviate, because you're not going to make it. And apparently, I'm right because you can't make a game if you have too many rule sets. And
However, I would like to counter that and say Eve Online is the counterpoint to your argument because that
yeah,
game is
it's rocking. Yeah.
ridiculously. I've
Mhm.
played it a couple times. I get
Yeah,
lost every time I try to play it, and
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. But there's so many simpler games that do very well.
so I want
Hmm.
to on this topic, um, because you mentioned this earlier, Phoenix, about EverQuest One. You lost interest after POP. Um, I made it to GOD. The only reason I switched was because EverQuest 2 came out, and I was like, I've
Yeah.
been 7 years here. I'm gonna go over here, and then I spent 7 years in EQ2.
Hmm.
But the thing that I remember, each EverQuest 1 expansion has a near and dear place in my heart, and I have very fond memories of each one. But one of the things I think for me, my favorite expansion was either the Lukeland expansion or the POP. Hands-on, the two reasons. One, they added AA, which AA, alternate advancement experience, really it separated the badass players from the mediocre players because the only
I
way you
think
could get
Those
AA
filthy
was
casuals.
Yeah, it was absolutely. That's exactly what it was. It was like the casuals. So I loved the AA system, but I also loved flagging or keying progression for raids so that you couldn't even get into those zones unless you did this, and
Mhm.
this. And it required a group of extremely coordinated top tier players who were willing to put in the time and effort. Both are important, but we're also skilled enough to be able to overcome those challenges as a coordinated group. Because you have to remember, this is kind of before voice chat became a big thing, so we were
Oh yeah.
having to coordinate things in typing. It's a lot easier these days to coordinate with a raid leader. Everybody just shut up and listen to the one person talking. Um, so I'm not saying that it necessarily required more skill back then than it does now to do raiding, but I do, for me, the complexity of raid progression and needing the right combination of alternate advancement experience to be able to have the right resists, to be able to breathe longer in underwater scenarios or in the vacuum of space on Lukeland. Like, there
Mhm.
were things, those really cool perks that you could get from being at that level of gameplay, and that complexity of group-based gameplay is what, for me, drove me for a very long time in terms of why do I play MMORPGs? And it's because I'm playing it with an elite group of people who are dominating and kicking ass, and we're doing things that no one else is doing. It's like 5% of the server population is doing this content, and we're in the top percent of that 5%. That was fun for me. But
Mm.
EVE Online, yeah, I've gotten lost every time. It's just like, what am I
Spreadsheets,
supposed to
man.
do?
Yeah, so
Right,
that's
spreadsheets.
exactly what that's exactly what I'm telling you about. You have to, like, for me, like, you got to be able to get into it. Like, the barrier of entry has to be
Mhm.
lower, like, so I can get into it. So
How
yeah,
low is
so
too
more
low,
people.
though?
That's a different
Wizard
story.
Wizard 101.
Yeah,
Which is
so
that? It's not a terrible MMO, by the way. That was actually the
yeah,
first one my
you
wife
got
and I played together. It is pretty good. It's a kids MMO. This is
you
the
got
only one the other computer could run, which is why we played it together.
I've been there.
But it is, it was for it's very basic. I mean, but at the same time, it's good enough for kids. But it was, even as a grown man and his wife, we still got our butts handed to it, probably by another 30-year-old at the time, but still. Also, it was cute that the kids found a way around the chat filter. Instead of calling everyone bitches, they called them benches. So
yes.
kids are you can't turn off
No, you.
cussing.
I mean,
Kids are
at the
smart.
end of, yeah, at the end of the day, you have to have fun. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah,
I'm.
and there's somebody out. There's people like my father that love uh, uh the Microsoft Flight Simulator and would
Mhm.
do that kind of thing like he had the setup. He would do everything. He'd go through the 40 things of a checklist on an aircraft,
Oh my
and
God, yeah.
he would put it all. He enjoyed that. He had nothing else. But that's what I'm saying. It really is all subjective, because for us it sounds awful. I mean, I
But
don't want
some
to
people,
actually learn
yeah.
how to fly a 747 or care about soil erosion in the stupid MMO, or how much fuel I need to get to the next star system and back.
Mm,
That's
right.
awful to me. But for somebody, that's a good weekend.
So on the complexity note, you just brought something up because it was on the list, and I kind of forgotten about it until I'm looking at the list right now. We were talking about, too complex, not complex enough, base grain, and looking at this one, good graphics and good
Mm,
animation kind of go hand in hand. And can those make or break a game? And this is an interesting thing because I also saw this pop up today. I'm in a really big point and click adventure game group in Facebook, and the same exact question got posed today to that group. Are there any point and click adventure games that you will or won't play because like the story's really good but the graphics are really shit? Like, will you still play the game? I think for MMORPGs the question is, how bad can the graphics be? How bad can the animations be before you just won't play it? Or do graphics and animations matter to you? Um, I kind of look at this and go, I grew up with EverQuest, so I
right.
have a very low barrier of what the graphics need to look like. But I will also say this, because now things have gotten so much better. I have a harder time every time I go back to try to play a progression server or Project
Hmm.
1999 or something, because every year it's like it gets it look. I tried to play, and I remember this being an amazing game back when I played it. Pools of Radiance, which was an old D&D game from I think the late 80s, and it was one of those ones where it was just 2D, and you're four arrows north, south, east, west type of thing, and you're just getting a static 2D image with and then you turn and now it's a new 2D
Right.
static image.
Yeah.
I tried to play that 2 years ago, and even though I have such amazing memories of that game, I literally lasted about 10 minutes and I said, "Fuck this! I
Hmm.
can't. I just can't handle that." Do you guys think that graphics matter in MMORPG, especially because we've talked a lot about the importance of immersion and the importance of
Yeah,
needing to feel like we're in a virtual world?
yeah.
Mm,
For,
Yeah.
for, for me, the graphics matter a lot because the new players won't touch it. Especially
Yeah.
for MMORPGs, they just won't. They see the advancements and what's going on with Final Fantasy and things like that. They just won't touch it.
Yeah.
Um, I think that they with the indie scene though, I think it's different because they have a lot of the pixel art, which is dominating. So if you can kind of get the Minecrafty pixel art in your MMO, that's probably the sweet spot as well. So you got to kind of think about it as that. So is it attractive? Is what we need to think about.
Because
Is it attractive for
isn't
the
that what
audience?
Smedley was doing before he got hired on to New World? He did that Kickstarter. I'm gonna go look at this while you guys are sitting here.
Something like. Yeah, and it is important. I mean, and I understand it from both a player and from a business perspective, especially, I mean, modern gaming industry. If it doesn't look good and run smoothly, now I'm not even talking about stylizing. If you your MMO doesn't need to look like Super Mario Brothers 3 necessarily, but at the same time, the pixel art thing, like you're saying, is very popular amongst. And I've played several games. What's the
Oh, I'll
or
play the hell out of
games
pixel
like
art.
yeah, games like Cuphead, which is an animation style that video games really don't do that often. But playing something like that, but not everything has to look like The Last of Us 2, or the latest Uncharted, whatever it might be, kind of a thing.
I agree. Yeah.
There, especially in an MMO, you have to there's a cutoff because you have to render all this stuff multiple, dozens
Well,
of people all on one server.
I think it's all about style too.
And there's style.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot, the artistic design, the world, the way world looks. I mean, look at what's the one Amazon's doing that I just
New
totally
World
blanked on? New World.
or Lost Ark. I
You know,
think they're doing well. There's
it looks okay. I mean, I know lumberyard engine is not great. It has evidenced by the fact that every game used on it has been canceled except for New World at this point.
Well, that's
But it does,
debatable, but yeah, yeah.
yeah. But it looks fine and it runs okay. I mean, yes, it was a beta, so I'm giving it slack on that. I don't judge too harshly on betas, even though everybody else does. But there's a certain aesthetic. If your aesthetic looks good, I mean, look at World of Warcraft. It came back. It's 2004, I think it was. It was 2 weeks from Everquest too, and they look totally different.
than they do
And yet
now. Yeah.
and I think they did what one they've done one style upgrade for the character, made the models a little better, but one of the biggest Western MMOs last they released numbers, which they stopped doing. And as opposed to, and even Final Fantasy 14, when you brought that up, it looks really good, but if you really really look at it, the graphics are starting to become dated because it's I think a 7 6 7 year old 8-year-old game now. I mean, it's starting to show its age. It looks good because that's the style that Final Fantasy has done it. It's always smooth edges, smooth lines, but when they're doing a cutscene and I'm looking at the ground and you can see it's not a flat texture and the bump mapping actually molds around for no reason whatsoever other than the fact that the camera shifted and it looks like the whole thing is made of sand when it's supposed to be a rock. there there's aesthetics to that, but far away it looks pretty good. Up close it gets a little shady.
They were
But
one of the things with Lotro that they're doing, because since Daybreak got bought out by that European company, they announced that they're doing. It was the investor call at the beginning of the year. They announced that they're doing a graphical revamp for Lotro to coincide with the launch of this new Amazon show that's coming
The
out, which
Amazon
is
show,
the
yeah.
the Second Age show. Um, I- it's interesting to me to see what they're gonna do because the world looks pretty good, and they've done a very good job of updating the world over the years. The character models, they've updated them once. It looks okay, but it definitely looks. I mean, that game came out in 2017. It's 2007, excuse me. So it's 14 years old now. So it's starting to feel its age, even with the two graphical updates that they've done. So I'm very interested to see what they're going to be doing because they've announced that 2022 is the arrival date of the graphical updates,
Yeah.
but they haven't said what they're updating. Are they updating the world? Are they updating the character models? Like,
Yeah.
I
Well, and even
don't
if they do
know.
the models, if they don't update the animation, doesn't matter, you're still slapping lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig underneath all that lipstick. But if the animation, like you said, it's 2007. At the time, it was really good. But I still see videos of Lord of the Rings online, and they move very stiffly, just
Yeah.
like the old EverQuest characters do. Even EverQuest 2, which I mean, given that's even older, they're very stiff. A lot of Final Fantasy 14, it's pretty darn stiff.
That's one of the
It's
things, as much as I tried to love Shroud of the Avatar, the movement
mm,
and the character animations, the one that pulled me out, though, the worst, was when you go to harvest a node, you lose control of your character. It actually moves your character around to a specific place before it'll harvest the node. So it's not like other games where it's just as long as you're within the vicinity and or you are facing the node, you can harvest it. With Shroud of the
hmm
Avatar, it takes if you click to harvest something, it takes control of your character and moves
wow,
it. And the other thing that drove me nuts too was if you're on auto run, any side movement or anything cancels the auto run. And those two things for me immediately take me out. And I'm like, I've lost control of my avatar. No, I don't. The movement for me took me out of that game. Those weren't the only things that I
wow,
didn't like, but those two things in particular, I didn't like the fact that it would take control of my character. And anything that auto run for me, if I'm on auto run, I should still be able to strafe and turn my
yeah,
camera and everything else. But no, in that, it was like as soon as you would do anything, any other movement input at all, it would just cancel the auto run. And it was like, nope, sorry. Movement for me is a big thing. Movement and
yeah.
animations. I mean, I don't. I put up with it in Lotro, but also because I've been playing it for so long, I think I've probably got this like
You're used to it.
yeah, I'm used to it. It's like my brain just
Yeah,
kind of ignores it. It's like, it's
yeah,
not that big of a deal.
yeah.
Um, whereas other games, it's like I look at it like Shroud, and I'm like, nope, not
No,
gonna let you pass. Sorry.
yeah. A big one. Back to the version 1.1, the failed version before Realm Reborn on Final Fantasy 14. A lot. My wife and I got the collector's edition of that, and we wanted to play it. I'm a big Final Fantasy 14 or Final Fantasy fan. They didn't have a jump.
Really?
The 1.0 had no jump, and when people asked it was before Yoshi P, who's the creative director now from 2.0 on, he laughed it off like, "Oh, MMO players don't need to jump. That's dumb," because they didn't jump in Final Fantasy 11, which was their other MMO. And so you could have, flat ground here and then right here. You it could be 2 feet. You had to walk all the way around, even
Oh
if that was just a two
man,
foot difference. You had to walk all the way around in order to get off of that. And honestly, it for us it was a kind of a big deal, just not being able to not only not jump, but not even fall 2 feet, or climb up 2 feet. It's not that big a
that
deal.
would
It's
be
not an
annoying.
Oh, it was. Oh, and it was. I mean, given that game was notorious for having, I think, one of the highest polygon potted plants in MMOs. So much so that if there were more than a few of them in an area, it crashed computers.
Damn.
The plant itself, the pot, had more polygons than the characters that were around it because it was the design on that game. It's a fascinating history of how Final Fantasy 14 rose or fell and then rose again. But it's just stuff like that is just I'm obviously I love the history of gaming and things like that. But if you don't do that stuff, movements, if it feels wonky and it feels janky. Oof, you're got a real hard uphill climb keeping your player base adult, let alone happy, just keeping a player base.
Yeah. By the way, that game I was thinking of was called Hero's Song by Smedley. He was
Oh
doing a
yeah,
pixelated game and it was right after he left Sony, but before he went to Amazon. But they canceled it. Um, Patrick Rothfuss, I guess, was doing lore on it, but I don't think it was an MMORPG. It just says, because I found the Indiegogo for it, and it just says RPG. It says it's a roguelike fantasy game done in a beautiful 2D pixel art style. Um,
Yeah.
the only reason I mentioned that is because we were talking about just art styles and graphics, and
Right.
that popped into my head.
Oh yeah.
Um, the only other thing I see on my list here is UI, and
Mm.
whether or not a good UI can make or break a game. If there's any game that you've played where the UI is just so atrocious that it makes you cringe, or if there's any games that have done UI, I love the Lotro UI. I think it's very it's got a classic D&D feel to it, but there's lots of tabs that you can go into and find more information that you want. I also loved EverQuest 2's system. EverQuest 1 is extremely dated by this point.
Oh yeah.
Back in the day, it looked cool, but now I look at EverQuest 1's inventory system and I'm like, ugh. And I see some of these indie games that are coming out that are doing like a very simple. The word that people like to throw around, it's a trendy word, which drives me nuts. We're a minimalistic UI. We're a minimalistic game. Ugh. Some of those
Yeah.
minimalistics I don't dig. But then
Sometimes being minimalistic is just a nice word
lazy.
for lazy.
Lazy.
Yeah.
But then you look at Eve Online and there's just so much going on that comes back to that complexity of there's too
Mm.
much UI. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on that or good games, bad games, etc.
Oh, I've been racking my brain. The worst for an MMO, and it's a failed MMO. I keep wanting to say Terra, but it wasn't Terra. It came out, so it's but it failed quickly. It had you know the Da Vinci Code, how he has that cylinder and it's got those spinning things on there like that. There was an MMO that used that concept. Apparently, that's the best I can come up with,
Okay.
as that was how your skills worked. So you would click a skill and it would spin that thing to the next skill, and then you click that one and it would spin it again. And then it would redo it. And it was animated. It actually was like a cylinder scroll kind of a thing. There was no point to it whatsoever. It could easily have just been, there's all sorts of games where you click one skill and it will buff the next skill that you use, and so on and so forth. And it's the rotation. Tried to simplify the rotation in this graphical spinning cylinder thing that made no sense at all whatsoever. You could have just given us two hot bars and just put it on there. People are smart enough. We've been figuring it out for a long time. That had to be the worst in an MMO anyway, outside of OG EverQuest, which was at the time was brilliant. And then we realized we're just staring at a pixel art book for 20 minutes straight.
You just brought something
Um,
up in my mind. It has nothing to do with UI per se, but I was thinking recently I tried the Magic Legends, I think is what it's called, which they originally said it was going to be an MMORPG, and then they backed off and said, well, it's more like an action RPG. But the thing it's multiplayer. You go in, you can have three people in your group. But the thing that I didn't like is you have a couple of static abilities, but then everything on your hotbar is random based on
oh
what,
yeah,
because it's a card deck. So you're pulling cards, and
yes,
so when you play a card, it randomly puts a new card into your slots. Now, the thing, Shroud of the Avatar does that as well, but they allow you to turn it on or off. Because remember, the default method is that your abilities are constantly switching based on what you have loaded into your decks, and that system, the UI complexity of it, of I don't have a static set. It's not purely UI based. It's more mechanics based, but that's something that popped into my mind.
yeah,
I do like a
Yeah.
static array of
Yeah.
abilities.
So for me, functionality is the biggest topic. You have a game like Rust. They don't need a lot of buttons.
mm-hmm,
I mean, do you really need that much? I mean, you have survival games that, as long as their functionality works and you get the point across, you can click in and click out of your inventory quickly. That's the sweet spot. So
yeah,
I don't think there needs to be too many bells or whistles or graphic improvements to go along with the aesthetics of the game. So I'm gonna do a little pushback on the minimalistic things. I think the minimalistic things work because it just limits yourself to what you need in a functional environment. So
There are
But-
some, if you look at like the updated version of EverQuest 1, like
Mm.
I think it's the Lukeland UI,
Mhm.
um, which is stripped down. You weren't staring at a book. You have your ability bar, which is what, 9 or 10 abilities, I think. 10, I think it went to 1 to 0. I don't think they did. I don't think they did 1 to equal sign. I think they did 1 to 10. It's been a long time. And then you
Yeah.
had your 9 spells, spell slots. That was functional, and then they added the compass to it. Um, and then a mini map eventually got added to that, which is all functional. Um, because I've been playing Star Wars: The Old Republic the last few days. I had a new individual who had never played the game before, was popped into one of my streams, and he had all these questions, and he's like, "What's that? What's that?" Because it's like as you're going into combat, like things are flashing on your hot
Mm-hmm.
bar, and it's like I'm just sitting here thinking, you know what? As a new player, this guy was completely overwhelmed
Yeah, I don't
because
like
of
that.
everything
No.
that's going on in the
Skill bloat
UI.
happens a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, well, skill bloat's a big thing. I was just thinking about EverQuest 2 when it comes to skill bloat because that game is
Yeah.
one of the worst out there. But I was just thinking about, because even with Star Wars: The Republic, you've got abilities that are flashing
Yeah.
on your hotbar, and then you've got so many explosions going off on the screen. It's
Yeah.
like, and then and
Yeah.
then you've got this up here is flashing, and this over here is flashing, and then you've got like this little
Yeah. Do
thing
you
over
remember
here.
the old school days where you just had like one spell? You worked on that one
Mm-hmm.
spell until you gain the
A
next
long
spell.
time.
A long time, and then you just progress that way. Right now, you get into a game and it's like there's buttons and whistles and things that are just overwhelming, and I'm just like, hey, can't do this. Can't. I'm out.
I think there
Yeah.
is a good balance between too minimalistic and
Mm.
uh, yeah, because you do
Yeah.
have to. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say ESO. It has technically total of 10, but 5 at any one time. You have 2 weapons. Each weapon can have up to 5 skills on your hotbar, and that's it. You're
Holy
done.
cow, it's a lot
Yeah.
too.
And that's like, doesn't Guild Wars 2 do it that way too? You've got 5 or 6 abilities depending on the weapon you're
I think
wielding.
so. Yeah,
Um,
and I mean you have more skills, but you can only have 5 at a time, and it's
mhm.
part of it's part of the meta. It's part of how the game functions. It's meant to be that way. But it's and meanwhile you go to level 80 in Final Fantasy 14, and you have 3 stacks of hotbars with 10. Every single slot is filled, and then there's one off on the side for healing
Potions
potions
and
or
yeah.
all just calling your mount, whatever else. And depending on the class, there can even be more than that. I played ninja, and that it can be very very
I've
overwhelming.
got
And
6 in Lotro, 6 hotbars.
there you go. Yeah,
It's
but
2 hours, guys.
yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I think we've covered
Good,
most
guys.
everything that we wanted to cover tonight. Is there
Uh-huh.
anything that we've missed that
Mm.
you guys want to bring into the episode?
No, I think we hit a lot of
Yeah.
criteria.
Anything I had was we at the very least touched on like locations, aesthetics, and things like that. The actual world itself has to look
I,
good, which kind of covered in the graphics. But
I
yeah, that's
cannot
pretty much
believe
it.
that we hit 2 hours. I think this is the first one.
I think the only other one we came close on was the crowdfunding. Well, one of the episodes we did with
Yeah,
Lexer, I think we got close to two
Mhm.
hours, but we got like an
Yeah.
hour and 45 in, so this is our longest one yet.
yeah, I can talk. I'm sorry.
No, no, no. When I went into this show, I was like, I like to do Joe Rogan length stuff, but a lot of people are like, I don't have that kind of time, so I try to shoot for an hour and a half because for most people, an hour and a half
Mm,
is good. But I'm happy to go for like 4
yeah,
hours.
yeah, I could, but
So I would like to say to everybody, if you've got your idea of what is make or break for a good MMORPG, let us know in the comments below because it, there are obviously a lot of games out there, a
Super
lot of
important. Yeah.
opinions.
mhm,
And it's good to know these things. It's great to have conversations about these things. It's great to look at what games are doing and potentially innovating on. I think one of the key takeaways for me in tonight's episode was um, hopefully we're moving in this direction with good AI and good technology moving towards worlds that are more adaptive in the sense that the player's actions can actually influence the way those worlds evolve beyond simply static content. Because that's something that I think we're all on the same page about in terms of
Hmm.
wanting to see
Yeah.
evolve in terms of MMORPGs or virtual worlds, as some people like to call them. Um,
I'm totally hyped up on the aspect that we could actually have a global income, which is kind of mind blowing for me. So where we can have people that can earn a living doing things like being a GM, which is
Hmm.
unheard of.
yeah, because this also
Yeah.
goes. I don't know if any of you ever, if you guys are Star Trek fans or not, but one of the things I liked, maybe it wasn't even Star Trek. I know they did it in Star Trek. I'm pretty sure they might have did it in Babylon 5 as well. But the idea of having these virtual reality suites or these hollow suites, holodecks, whatever you want to call them, but then there are people whose sole job is to create experiences for those.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it could be, you don't have to be a game
Really
developer. It's
awesome.
like you're just an author.
You're an experienced creator.
There,
Yeah.
Yeah,
there
you're
was
just a,
a Deep Space Nine. The guy that played Barkley
thank you.
was actually programming and making a hollow novel. Yeah,
That's
people that
the
wrote
one that
hollow
was,
novels.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that's the one
That's
I was
absolutely.
thinking of. I couldn't remember. It was I know they did it in Babylon 5, and I know they did it in
Yeah,
Deep
I only
Space
remember
Nine.
it because in the original Enterprise they accidentally called him Lieutenant Broccoli instead of Barkley. Was his?
Barkley.
Yeah,
broccoli.
yeah.
So
He's a fantastic actor.
can we agree that this is the way?
This is the
This is
way.
the way.
This is the way.
All right, everybody. That's going to be a wrap on this episode. Please make sure to leave your comments below. Next important thing is to check the links below because we've got links below to both of these guys and their different projects and where you can find them and what they do. Of course, don't forget to follow along with this channel and hit the bell icon so you get updates when all the other things that we do go live. And tune in next week where we will be coming at you live again. Not live. I'm never live, but coming at you with a new episode of Mondays and MMORPGs. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Yeah.